So we are going to talk about the implicit and explicit function today. What is basically a implicit function and what is a explicit function? So suppose I have written y is equal to 3x plus 5. Now anyone with a little knowledge of mathematics can say that x is a independent variable and y is a dependent variable because y depends on the value of x. So y is obviously a dependent variable and x is a independent variable. Now is this function a explicit function or is this function a implicit function? So basically when we can represent the dependent variable by the independent variable, then it is a explicit function. Just like y is equal to 3x plus 2y plus 5. So in this function you can write that y minus 2y is equal to 3x plus 5. You can write minus y is equal to 3x plus 5, and again you can write y is equal to minus 3x minus 5. So you can actually represent y by x. That means you can actually represent the dependent variable by an independent variable. So this is a explicit function and this is an example of the explicit function. So if I have to give the explanation or definition of the explicit function, then what I can write? So basically the definition of explicit function is very simple. For going to the definition of the explicit function, we have to just write that when the dependent variable, so when the dependent variable can be explained by the independent variable, then it is a explicit function. It is an explicit function, then it is an explicit function. What are the examples of this explicit function? Suppose I have written y is equal to 5x square plus 9. It is obviously an example of explicit function. Similarly, I have written y square is equal to 3x square minus 7t plus 2y square. Now you can obviously represent this function as y square minus y square, you can represent this function as y square is equal to 70 minus 3x. So you can represent y is equal to 70 minus 3x to the power square root. So you can represent y is equal to root over 70 minus 3x. So you are actually successful to represent the dependent variable with respect to the independent variable. So obviously this function, which looks little bit different, but this function is also an explicit function. But in the case of implicit function, well, it is basically the adverse thing of the explicit function. If you can't represent the dependent variable with respect to the independent variable, or when you can't represent the dependent variable by the independent variable, then it is an implicit function. So suppose it is written as x square plus xy plus y square equals to 0. Now can you represent y is equal to only the terms of x on the right hand side? That means y can only be represented by the independent variables. Can you represent y by only the independent variables? Is it possible to represent y by only the independent variables x? Let us try to do this. So even if I try to consider this, at first I will take, suppose I have taken common of this y from here, so it will become x plus y, and x square is remaining at the same part, so equal to 0. Now I am just putting this x square in this side, so it will now become y into x plus y is equal to minus x square. So y is basically nothing but minus x square divided by x plus y. So y is nothing but minus x square divided by x plus y. So you can see from here that y can't be represented by only x. We can't represent y by only x, but there is also an y that is in the equation. So y can't be represented by only the independent variable x. There is a requirement of y also to represent the y. So that's why it is not an explicit function, it is an implicit function. So what is basically the definition of implicit function? Now if I write the definition of implicit function, then that is when you can't represent the dependent variable by independent variable, then that is implicit function. Then that becomes an implicit function. So implicit function is basically a very easy thing to understand. When you can't represent the dependent variable by independent variable, then it is an implicit function. And examples are also given.